I guess we're all here then, she said, almost to herself. Then, realizing her apparent lack of confidence, turned up the volume. Welcome, riders. Are you ready to do some great hiking and some terrific riding? Yes, the women said brightly in unison. Sure, the man said, like a footnote. Perhaps some introductions would be good. Greer looked at a 50-something woman with a nice smile. I'm Fern, and I'm working on a memoir about my mother and father, she said. I'm Sarvat, said another. I'm writing about my spiritual journey that began after a divorce. I also speak 5 languages. The crystalline Santa Fe spirit was cracked by the man. He had not shaved in a day or so, and stubble peppered his chin. He looked at Greer, almost staring as he waited his turn. Greer could almost see his mind clicking through whatever it was he thought he had to say. My name is Paul. I think writers' groups are bullshit, he said. Greer cleared her throat and watched the eyes of the rest of the group fall downward uncomfortably. They assembled into a loose line and began the journey up the trail. Well worn, the path was wide and wound its way through the aspen and ponderosa pine forest. Though still on an incline, the trail settled into a snaky line beside a swift, narrow stream. The water gives me a peaceful feeling, said Sarvat. One of her gloved hands touched a necklace of colored beads that hung loose over her parka. It's almost like a Buddhist chant. There were agreeable murmurs from the group. It is very grounding, Greer said a bit too quickly. She looked at Paul, who had far from a serene look on his face. He was looking into a hole in the ice. Greer followed his eyes toward the hole. In it, there was a green leaf, curled in the shape of a small boat, like in a fairy tale, pinballing off the edges of the icy hole. They came on the waterfall from the side and watched a narrow plume of water plunge 50 or so feet into a rocky bowl where it swirled wildly, then spilled into a white torrent down the mountain. The water was loud, and the throbbing they had heard down the trail was a roar here. Greer motioned for them to move away from the waterfall. It was impossible to speak over it this close. She gently herded them into a clearing. The air was much colder in the altitude. She brought her hands together. So let's sit here for just a bit and do a little writing and then head down for the fire. Write the first thing that comes into your head. They broke into tiny clumps and sat cross-legged, tiny notebooks in their laps and writing earnestly, all except Paul, who sat nearest Greer and looked back down the trail. His notebook was open and blank. She moved a little closer to him and quietly said, "Are you okay? Got a little block?" The hood of his jacket was pulled over his head, which he gently shook. "No, I'm not blocked. It's this place." "Why did you come if you think this is bullshit?" "I think I did it just to prove a point to myself." "So what's the point?" "To prove I can write whenever and wherever I want." She looked at the clean white pages of his notebook. "I had better check on the others." The pen stopped, and the sun moved past noon. Greer gathered the group for the trek down the mountain. They re-entered the icy place on the trail beside the cold rushing river, now striped by the shadows of the trees above it, and the group bunched up. "This reminds me of a holy place in Nepal," said Sarvat. Some sort of inversion had created a cold fog. They moved like nervous soldiers tiptoeing through a minefield as the trail melted away. Greer was behind Paul. The cloud had thickened so fast she felt alone with him, even though she knew the group was strung out like sections of a caterpillar on the trail in front and behind them. "Please watch out," Sarvat said from up ahead. "There is a really slick place here by the stream. Remember, walk with purpose, but without thought." Paul reached the ice just ahead of Greer. Suddenly, he was down and in the creek. The ice over the water crunched and cracked, and she heard him yell, "Fuck! I'm in the water! I'm in the water!" Freezing and crashing through the ice over the stream, Paul was shoved down the creek like an icebreaker. Greer ran and came on Servat, who was standing on the edge of the creek with a long branch, pushing it toward Paul, who grabbed it and began pulling himself from the creek. "Jesus, are you alive? Are you okay?" The women stood in an anxious and mystified group around the soaking wet and shivering Paul, who kept saying through chattering teeth, "I fell off the path. I fell off the path." Servat and Fern helped Paul up. Greer took off her coat and wrapped his soggy shoulders. Sticky paper. Walk with purpose, without thought. The words spun in Paul's head. Greer drove him to her house. He stumbled getting out of her car. She led him over a path of ragged slate. She covered him in quilts and built a fire. He took tea from her. "What were you thinking when you fell in?" she asked, besides the obvious. The shock was amazing. Then I realized I am truly alone, rolling and tumbling and out of control in a stream full of energy. Servat is right. There is a path. You only know it is your path when you leave it. What if there's no path for anyone? Then every road would be a lie. He tasted the tea. It was hot, with a delicate taste he liked.
Olé.